We don't have the time?
Yeah, you're right.
All right, so I think I'm going to have a recurring nightmare now of being that poor engineer who suggested that bottling was sufficient for Kelly. I reckon that's something I So, and the specialist here, that's at a level of expertise. You're going to get none of that from me because I'm neither a biologist, a chemist, an astronomer, or anything. I go through this, so I'm going to take you on a little journey as to why I'm here talking. Let me start with though thinking it's been interesting. Part of my talk, of course, like everyone's talk at the end of a workshop like this, is superseded by events. But I think the question that's really framed for me is how do we build community support for effective climate action? That's the area that I can help out with. Okay, so as given the expertise in the room is going to give us the understanding of what that effective lighting action may be. But I want to focus on building community support, and I guess my sort of jump to the four things that come to mind for me listening to this is connecting to the broader issues for local communities that are higher priority, connecting to the broader sustainability issues that lighting is one part of, building voluntary action that will support regulatory action down the track, which is a good culture change principle, I think. And then also celebrating this as an advance, not a retreat. And so some of this language is what I've picked up in the work we've been doing in Bundaberg, but I think in general in the work I've done over some years now. And it seems to me we could probably really, right now, reach out to other organisations in similar kind of positions. I think of the sort of battles around sea level rise and local governments, it's occurring around the country as well, in particular New South Wales, where you've got a significant penalty for some local residents who have beachfront properties that are essentially cannot be developed on, and what that means. What does planned retreat mean? How do we pay for it as a community? What are the long-term implications of climate change on our coastal areas? So I think all of those things are part of this discussion, and I know we're into more the social and community component of that, but I think it's really important that we underpin the reality that we live in a world where good science and data doesn't win the argument every time. For those of you who've been catching up with what's being going on in the US at the moment, clearly we live in a very adversarial political community, and the work I've been doing in climate change now for 20 years is probably the best case study for how not to do public policy. And I think in our country we now have a real problem that even good arguments will simply get knocked over by numbers. As in democratic numbers. So that's where I come from. And this is us green. Very, very simple. Individuals and companies give us money to offset the impact. And we plant forests, we plant trees. We used to say once upon a time, now we talk about restoring ecosystems, and that's because, of course, forests are a movie, they're not a photograph. We can begin them, if we're clever, we can create resilient ecosystems which will manage to respond to fire and drought and pest and weed infestation, so on, and that's our aim. So this is the proof, this is where our species is a very visual one, and the area that gets most clicks in our website are always the before and afters, as is the old weight loss one, right? So here's the stripped out paddock, 2004, and then in 8 years later, same space, these thriving local native forests. So we only plant local native forests, but not monocultures, we're talking mixed environmental plantings. And our focus is very much on demonstrating hope, if you like. So people give up thinking, oh, well, politics is no good, we'll just retire to our own backyard. We can demonstrate actually the ecosystem can be restored very quickly. given the right kind of care. I think that's an important message that we get out to a lot of people around the community regularly. Similarly, I'm also going to focus a little bit on the work we've been doing across Australia and New Zealand, and then zeroing on Bundaberg. This is to give you a sense of the sort of scale that can be achieved in terms of native trees planted. Problem, and of course, forests, and we're also doing a lot of work with blue carbon, mangrove seagrasses, salt marsh, and I think there's an enormous opportunity in that we hope to be able to do. We work both in the voluntary market, as I said, but we also have a financial services license and trade act use. So we're not really excited by that because our work is very much at a premium. So, and lastly, I think this work, and I just really bring this to your attention, because I think it's an important context for where we came to our Bundaberg work, is at the moment we're working in sunshine in the western part of Melbourne, pulling out a concrete channel. Remember, we put in concrete channels around the world to manage floodplains and then put more houses in. And then we discovered that really mucks up the ecology. So we're pulling that concrete channel out and putting in an 8-hectare urban forest in a very, very obesogenic area. This is an area which gets 4 degrees hotter on a day when it's over 40 in the CBD of Melbourne. So enormous possibility, lots of innovation, very interesting area for those of you who might want to look at that down the track. Now I think I'm going to jump through this because I've heard enough about turtles to take it. Today is turtles. What I want to talk about is why we're in Bundaberg. And then I will talk a little bit about turtles. So as I said, my organisation works around the country and in New Zealand. So why would we work in Bundaberg when we're based in Melbourne? Well, the second most urban city. We are around the country, depending on job and rainfall. And Bundaberg has a very strong competitive advantage. And that's Queensland. So Queensland is amongst you. We're hoping that we're close to the Queensland government that on the one hand, trade, the biggest problem we have in this country is around climate change. In Queensland with a carbon farming industry, so we give farmers something alternative. So we began work in Bundaberg and then discovered the opportunity to bring together a couple of organisations, and from that I want to start to build a picture of how we are trying to develop this notion of building community support for lighting action. So our longest term supporter is Walt Disney Company. They came to us when, hands up who knows the Finding ... movies, those of you the kids no doubt know them, Finding, yes, Finding Nemo and Finding Dory. And so Finding Nemo, which was the first one, enormous problems because suddenly clownfish became widely, I'm not sure extinct, but they certainly became heavily bought up and became a real PR disaster for Disney. So they got ahead of the game. They talked to us, could we do something? And we created a thing called Remember the Reef and started to do some work down the southern, so I worked at the southern tip of that area. So for Disney, this is a part of their continuing corporate social responsibility, which I know many of us may feel cynical about, but I think it's legitimate to say that Disney, that's a fairly core ethic in that company, going back to the original Walt Disney. And then secondly, they recognise that this is a very political area and that they were likely to get smacked. And so they wanted the protection of working with NGOs like myself. They still got smacked, so you may remember one of the morning shows, there was, why would this big American company come and tell us what to do, which was really sad, but there we go. So the Walt Disney Company came in and started working with us on the basis of how they could managed to be a positive supporter for the work that we were going to undertake. Prince's Trust Australia is Prince Charles charity, and they also wanted to do some work on the reef. The Prince is particularly interested in what happens on Great Barrier Reef, and he's a pretty smart guy, and he's well read and well briefed. So Prince's Trust very keen to get involved, working as a sort of supporter to the area. And then I'll talk. No, I've had to change the slide around. And since we began the original collaboration, we've also managed to bring on Bundaberg Regional Council. I've worked with local governments for many years in the role, and I recognise that Bundaberg Regional Council, like all councils, have an enormous amount of opportunities to take action. We've talked a fair bit about this on the last day or so. Most local governments don't understand the powers they have, often very constrained in what they can do. And Bundaberg's like that too. But I'll sort of talk about how we've gone about working with them. Sea Turtle Alliance is the local organisation that works directly, often volunteering down on the Polar Turtle Hatchery. Fantastic group of environmentalists, very passionate what they're doing. Bundaberg Tourism Authority, obviously concerned to build tourism, and of course DES. Is there anyone from DES here? No? So you know, you'll probably heard of Olympus. If you don't, you will sometime down the track. We're talking turtles. So this sort of group, how do we build a group like this? So this is one issue immediately when we start to think about building support for communities. How do you manage so many different agendas, different language, and different opportunities? I'll demonstrate how we go about that. So we immediately said what we want to do is talk what we call community activation. We saw there is an existing program with DES, so that's DES is the state body that actually owns and manages the area around Monaco. They were very much looking for a thing called Cut the Glow. They've been pushing that for the people who come along every year, and I think it'd be fair to say it was probably done some years ago and needed a bit of a refresh. But we thought, okay, let's focus on activating the community, practical approaches, technology changes, and educational frameworks. So things that made sense to us at the very beginning. Now, Greenfleet's a practical group. We're not an advocacy organisation. A lot of people do things on in the political process. We're not part of the group. We play. We plant a lot of trees, working with communities, the local Gidagil Corporation, the local Indigenous community there. Of course, local natives. We also put in some particularly difficult native species, which we wouldn't normally do, but we did that on the basis that this was the way to include those who were quite passionate about it locally, which gave them a sense of ownership, and etc. So a fair whack, 89 hectares, a fair size, and that's now over time. So these are ecological systems. Over time, this will, we hope, form a bit of a green curtain up as close as we can get to the beach area. We also did a lot of work bringing people out, not only community planning days, but you'll know that Prince Charles came to open the Commonwealth Games. When was that? Last year? No, this year. Sorry. This year, and in April, and he then, because of the project that we're running, he came to Bundaberg, and he did a workshop with a whole group of us out on Lady Elliot Island, and really promoted, and was seen to be promoting this project. And what that did is very important to send a message to key decision makers and influencers who may or may not have thought turtle sliding, whatever, but who saw someone very much from the establishment, even though Charles is seen as a slightly unusual specimen of that. Nevertheless, he does have weight, and of course everyone's scrambling to make sure they can meet him. Blair Witherington, again, someone who some of you will know, one of the great turtle scientists globally, no longer working, I think, worked for Disney over in Florida, and came over, and we got him to speak to the media, the mayor, and all those sorts of groups to just really demonstrate that there is an interest in it. So again, very practical, lots of media. This is the sort of core, one of the core building blocks as we go to build community support for lighting action. We need to be putting these bits in place. We need to have data, yes, but we also need to be making sure that influencers and decision makers are getting the issue at a high level. So this is not going to be, let's sit down and read a 20-page report. This is going to be a conversation with them there. And then, of course, we connected up a whole lot of different communities of interest. You see them there, including existing programs like Reef Guardians and so on. And often these are groups which are struggling to do practical things. Lots of really good people, great intentions, but how do we get them to take action on the ground? And so what we did was Disney gave us some great intellectual property. We created these calendars, which sounds silly, but incredibly effective. So the kids in particular, but we have businesses as well, would have a calendar on their fridge between November to March, April, the hatching time. They would mark off with each of these with a little sticker. Squirt, thank you. I don't have little kids. So. Squirt. And so all the kids love doing this, and it was all very nice. It's fantastic that Disney did that, and they're now doing stickers for the upcoming season, which will also go on households at the front and on businesses and all the rest. So the intent is to slowly build a bit of consciousness about this. Some parts of the community will never touch this, but we reckon that, and 20% will embrace it quickly. So how do we get that chunk of people in the middle? And I'll explain why we're trying to do it that way. Of course, over there, Bundaberg Rum, a key iconic employer in the area. Bundaberg is astonishingly a very low socioeconomic area, very high youth unemployment. One of the councillors told me that she offered to pay half the wages of her daughter to get her a job, and the guy said no, he couldn't afford it still. So this is, which simply amazes me, but we forget, don't we? You know, the future's here, it's just distributed unevenly, as they say. So Bundaberg Rum, really important to get them involved, and could be a great influence down the track. Lots of calendars, lots of stickers. So this is about trying to think about people, don't think what others can do, but let's not talk about what the government should do, let's talk about what you can do right now and start to build this sense of ownership, in this case, about lighting. So every night we have the kids would go around, close all the blinds, make sure the outside lights on. It sounds, and same with businesses, it sounds very small. We know that as a percentage of the total issue, the Woolworths car park is a much more important one. But nevertheless, it's very important in democracies that we build that kind of ownership and involvement. Why is that? Well, because council, when I spoke to council, I spoke to the full council, the deputy mayor was very supportive. The mayor, okay, he was a state politician as previously, and he was, no one was saying this is crap, it was really saying this is not our highest priority. So, and in particular, there was an ideological issue here, which I'm sure we'll all hit in various ways, maybe not in some of the more progressive councils, but many councils would say, well, we could do something on our own land. We may even push for street lighting, you know, maybe outdoor areas, but I'm not sure we want to touch private businesses, because then we start to hit ideology, right? I think they got 12 to 15% of the nation voted in this area in the Queensland election. So there's a significant chunk of people who feel concerned about that. And I'm not dismissing it, I'm just saying that that's what it is. So, they said they could do a certain amount on public lighting, but they were very wary of impacting on private lighting. And so we thought changing private lighting is the key to building some political support for councils to take more effective action. But that's the key. That if we could, either through calendars and stickers, broadly get people to change behaviour, then we think that there's an opportunity for our councils, for the councils to get more, a bit more, not brave, but politicians, a lot of people can say, well, politicians, they're spineless, they don't lead. They get voted out, that's what happens. So it's a pretty brutal mechanism, democracy, and the best way to work with is to understand it and work it rather than saying, well, they just trump their hands. So I think having a significant group in the community doing that sort of work hopefully will give our councils more willingness to do that. And I've had a couple of other sort of ways of framing that since being at this conference. So one way that, remember I talked before about connecting the issues with broader issues that were very high priority. So the Mayor is particularly keen on smart cities. Now, local governments often it's hilarious listening to it. It's going to be saving things for local communities, which is not true. And it's not all about technology, of course, and there are lots of ethical and social things underpinning. Nevertheless, it's a very, very interesting area. And we know that streetlight pole will be a very important hub. Mind you, one of our other great supporters at Greenfleet is the Big Valley bins, the rubbish bins, which have solar lights that compact down 7 times and have a SIM card to tell you when to pick it up. And they're making the claim that they can be a much more amenable hub for this sort of work. So it's interesting to see how they work out. But the Mayor's very keen to leapfrog technology and development. So think of him having a low base of skills. In fact, Telstra did a survey when they discovered that the Bundaberg area has the lowest digital literacy for 15 to 25-year-olds in the country, which is astonishing. I can't work out how that's possible, because the great cliche would be the reverse, wouldn't it? But so I said to the Mayor is, here's an opportunity for you to go hard on this. They went in for as you probably know, the federal government's been supporting this work. I'm hoping in the next couple of weeks they'll support the work in Bundaberg, and the focus will be lighting impacting on Monterey Pipeline turtles. So that's the edge they've gone in on. So this is a nice way of weaving the issues together in a fairly conservative council. We also work, I know I've been talking to a few people here about this, we work closely on the economic development issue. 30,000 tourists a year go to Monterey Pipeline. That's internal and external. And it's about $15 million per year to the local economy. I think that's slightly understated. And there's all sorts of interesting issues around how you might build the infrastructure up, but there's also an interesting issue of how far you can go. The state government is currently investing $10 million in a new interpretation centre at the turtle hatchery. So the issue will be, will that increase the numbers going through, and what are the impacts on the classic ecotourism model point? And we also have a lot of our Greenfleet supporters who are very keen to get involved in this. There are some people in Bundaberg who don't like turtles. I find that incredible. I'm not sure anyone in this room would put their hand up and say I don't like turtles. It's an extraordinary concept. But you know what? People don't. They don't because they see them as they're stopping development. Yeah, so they're connecting development and turtles in a different way. So what we've got to do is, in the democracy, is win that argument very much about connection, about how you connect. And in the old days, and even Cole talks about this, they used to go down and ride them in the early days. It's got lots of photos of the horrible things that used to happen to turtles down there. When I say the old days, it wasn't that long ago, it wasn't a generation back. So we're really connected to our supporters who get very excited by the notion of being able to plant trees that will help in the long run. This is a long-term issue. It's not going to happen tomorrow. In the long run, this will help to reduce the light impact on turtles. So this is also a we are okay. Yeah. So this is also about the fact that, again, we hit development and conservation. High priority for the local community, maybe ones that will create jobs, maybe ones that will start to bring in Indigenous communities. Very strong disabilities jobs group up there as well. They're keen to be involved. We think there's a lot of opportunity around interpretation and all sorts of things. And I think actually the sort of Wescott tourism that we've been talking about here is a really big opportunity up there as well. There's an enormous adversarial battle about the Great Barrier Reef. Bundaberg's on the southern tip of it, and so the political context is also about not only connecting but not getting caught up in the wrong kind of debates. Does that make sense? So what we don't want to do is have lighting become an icon in the culture wars, or that's what people would say, or a problem that gets locked into other big problems. Oh, it's people from Melbourne saying what people in Bundaberg should do, which I've never say. So lots of issues we need to be careful about. Nevertheless, this notion of the slow transition from sugarcane mining, etc., across to a tourism-based economy along these very sensitive areas is clearly in the long-term interest for our country. But how do we do that in a democracy where local communities will struggle with how to do that? And frankly, the rest of the country doesn't want to pay, which we should, but we have to work out a way to make that happen. Now, right now, and I was talking about this before, there's a very major development that sort of picks up a couple of these threads. So when we started talking to council, we said what you need to do is develop a sister-city relationship in Florida, so we can cooperatively learn with others who've done a lot of action on this issue. Melbourne Beach was actually founded by a guy from Melbourne and at that beach they have an ordinance where the entire area through the nesting season goes entirely dark, and incredible opportunity to demonstrate. The communities can do this quite comfortably. Now that relationship is being developed between Bundaberg and Melbourne Beach. So in a way, what we're trying to do is institutionalise the learning process so that we don't have to be telling people what to do. It's about a learning process. At the same time, Bundaberg has developed a strong relationship in China, for which they won quite a few awards. And one of the fruits of that, a slightly bitter fruit, is that there's now a major investment being proposed, on the Gara foreshore. So really very, very close to the Turtle Hatchery. 9 stories, an area where I think the current planning seems is 3 stories, if I remember rightly, Kelly. So leaving aside whether that's appropriate development for an area in terms of height, obviously the last thing we need is to create an issue like this. So this will test a lot of the little threads we've been talking about here, about how resilient that process is. Because if that development is approved without an enforceable guarantee that at least through that period there will be reduced lighting. I understand here there's a bigger issue now that's really being identified around lighting, but I think I'm a bit of a pragmatist. Step 1 is, can we at least between November and April zero out the light, which is big enough ask. If we can get that and it's enforceable, then I think it can be moved forward. But otherwise, it's going to split that community and be a major problem down the track. So reconciling development and conservation sounds good in theory on a slide, but in practice, it's going to be very, very awkward. So what we're currently resetting what we want to do, and I know this is a slightly bigger sort of social community development approach, but we're going to continue to build partnerships locally and regionally. It seems to me that Dark Skies really have something to offer here. I don't think they've got a presence at all in Bundaberg, as far as I know.
On IDA?
Yeah. No. And I think having international presence there has a quite out of kilter emphasis, because large organisations have got 2 global brands already in Disney and in Prince Trust Australia. The opportunity is that they are very influential, and it would be great to maybe think about how that could work. We'll be pushing hard on community behaviour change programs continue. I think unless practically people are given tools to do it, it all sounds like good in theory. I'll do it for a week and then I'll forget about it. So we need some way of ensuring, even during the holidays, which is the hardest part, the school kids will go home, so we're not able to influence the households with the kids. We have to do that. We're looking at a major turtle festival. So I've spoken to the Minister in Queensland about this, Leanne Enoch, very excited about this. You're welcome to turtles, bring them in, make of it an advance, not a retreat, but an advance. This is a major reason for the world to look to Bundaberg. So don't hide the light under the bushel, let's make this an advance. And then continue to connect smart cities. I'm a big believer that, Picasso said, good artists copy, great artists steal. I think you take all the best ideas from around the world and just don't worry about going through your own long-term process and so on. Just whoever's doing it best, grab those ideas. So I'm hoping that we can continue to do that, and maybe out of this, the papers today and yesterday and the stuff that will come out over the next couple of months, we can feed that into the process as well. Thank you very much. Any questions for one? We think it can be scaled up easily. That's why the stickers are going to be used. My ideal would be to have calendars distributed and online, of course, more ideally, in November right across the region, and then collected so that we can demonstrate that you've got all the little turtle stickers on them. Telstra, who's a strong supporter of Greenfleet, is now offering to potentially, I haven't got this in yet, but I'm hoping, they will text all of it. They've got a competitive advantage there because Vodafone doesn't have much of a tower. I'm hoping that they will text and connect to their subscribers at the start of the season and maybe every month, just to remind people of their own personal impact. And again, this is, we don't know, so that would be great if they do that. But more importantly, we don't yet know because we haven't. There's various lighting order opportunities around this, and we're hoping to get Kelly involved in this. And the council is committed to do something, and maybe the Smart Cities application will fund that too, I think. But what we don't really know is what kind of impact that's having, because of course, as we all know, there are other things, foxes, climate change is heating up the beaches, there's all sorts of other things going on with turtles. What we're trying to do is say, what can we as a community control? Can we do what we can do? And then we really have to advocate elsewhere. And you can deal with foxes, that's pretty easy, but climate change, probably not such an easy issue. The question, yeah.
Yes, I'm on the Sunshine Coast, 100 k's south of Bundaberg.
Yes.
Trying to get the dark sky reserve there.
Right.
Everybody's on board. All the councils have tried to go down the IDA guidelines. The response to the Queensland government that we talk to, and particularly Energetic's line on the streetlights in Queensland, is hear what you say, don't care, engineers rule, get stuff. So who in Queensland government is on board?
Yes, well, there you go. And I think Sunshine Coast would be fair to say you've got a long way down the track compared to Bundaberg. So who's on board? Well, the trouble is energy utilities are always a rule to themselves. We all know that. So Leanne Enoch is definitely on board. And I can give you the right advisor. The environmental advisor to the Premier now is a good guy who you should definitely be talking to. So the question is going to be, how do we phase it and have you got enough local support? And saying the council, I think there have always been supported as far as I can say. The question will be, are there major developers with money who want to oppose that? Otherwise, it's sent through. My preference would be to do the whole thing as an entire region, because councils work best when they work, the ROCs, the regional organisation of councils, are there for a good reason, because they get picked off otherwise. So what we really want to say is, let's give developers a clean way to deal with this right along the reef, along the coast, in particular your area, and so that we don't have that, they have to pick and choose the difference, because they'll always use that as an argument against Sunshine Coast going out ahead of everyone else. So, but I'm happy, I'll bring my cat, I'm happy to follow up on that.
Any more questions? Could you thank Wayne once more?